Chapter 8 of A Superfluous Woman by Emma Frances Brooke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bruce Peary. One afternoon, Jessamine had been tempted to take a longer walk than usual, and found herself some miles away from home, overtired and dragging exhaustedly along the highway alone. Moreover, the sky threatened storm. While in this evil case, she heard behind the sound of wheels, and, turning round, saw McGilvray approaching in an open trap. As he came up, he lifted his hat, and Jessamine signed to him to stop. "Are you going back home, Mr. McGilvray?" asked she. "Oh, yes, I am going to Dalfaber." "I am very tired. Would you be so kind as to let me drive with you?" "Indeed, Miss Halliday, and I will be most pleased whatever," responded Colin, with his most courteous air. Jessamine got into the vehicle by his side. It was a very common dog-cart, ill-hung and of preposterous height, and the horse that pulled it was an imperfectly broken-in farm beast that started and shied on every small occasion. Nevertheless, she nestled down by the driver with a sense of well-being, thrusting her hands under the rough rug which he folded carefully over her because the air was chill. It was the first time she had had an opportunity of really long-continued converse with McGilvray, and in all these weeks it seemed to her that she had but nibbled at the outside crust of intercourse, and now, while the horse jogged on at a lurching trot, she feared that he was disposed for silence. "There is storm in the sky," she ventured at last. "Ay," answered Colin, "friend or foe?" And as he spoke he leaned forward, the reins hanging loosely in his hands, and looked skyward. The horse instantly dropped into a walk. Jessamine seized the opportunity of McGilvray's altered attitude to observe more deliberately the firm line of his profile, the composed folding of his lips, the steady uplift of his eyelid, and the clear depth of his eye. This was not an intellectual face, but it was a strong one, with the unconquerable quality of mass. His proximity brought with it impressions of warmth, wholesomeness, and power, and his elusive silence piqued curiosity at once by a denial and a promise. After so much clever or vapid chatter, how this reticence spoke to her inmost mind! "Friend or foe?" repeated Jessamine inquiringly. "A body gets thinking whiles," said Colin, still staring upward. "Yes," returned Jessamine. He glanced down at her, and pointed to the sky with his whip. "We hoe and deg and drive the plough," said he, "but yon is the great tiller. Mornin' by mornin' we go out to search his face, and then we must be waitin' on his smile or frown." "Yes." "It will be a strange thing to work so hard, and be so helpless. Whilst a man's heart feels sore in his body when he stands by the cornfields, to see the grain beaten with the smiting of the showers, until the yellow heads lie low on the bet land. And then, come eventide, the clouds open, and the sunshine flies and sets the hills laughing under it. And though the grain lies beaten, the sunshine wins." "Wins?" "Ay, wins the soreness from the heart." "Is that because it is beautiful?" "Oh, yes, because it is beautiful. The smile runs over the heart, and makes a body think." "Does it?" "Oh, yes, it will be like a book with thoughts in it." "But you get tired of always working and always waiting." Colin looked over towards his horse's ears with a smile. "Ay, a body gets tired, but the sky will not be always against us, and when the weather's grand, it works for 10." Still, you are obliged to be constantly doing the same thing from year's end to year's end. Oh, yes, just so, returned Colin quietly. And do you not wish for something different? An odd momentary light shot into Colin's face from some inward source. Whiles a body dreams, said he. And then you want to get away, to do something different, said Jessamine, leaping to probable conclusions. No, it suffices, answered the man. What suffices? asked Jessamine, discontentedly closing up her idea. The dreamin' is enough, repeated McGilvray. It will be a wonder where the thoughts will be comin' from that enter a man's head, and how, such strangers to one another, and so uncalled for as they will be, they will just end always in the same thing. And how do they end? In a thankfulness that a man's way is appointed, and in findin' that, after all, it looks bootifully. Oh, said Jessamine. Well, yes, perhaps after all that is the best. Perhaps it is beautiful. Oh, yes, returned Colin with delight. It will be beautiful. The shinin' that comes into a body's mind from within is a guide, and makes the limits of his path plain. And yet what? The slow, rare smile hovered again about his lips. He flicked several flies off his horse as he stared reflectively at it before answering. If we bide a wee, who knows? Said he, as though to himself. He spoke so inwardly that the words were as the shutting of a lid over some secret treasure of the spirit. Jessamine was left on the outside of the closed casket. She wanted to undo the lock and to see that which he would not display, and rash desire precipitated her into indiscretion. "Do you ever talk like this to your friend Mr. Mackenzie?" asked she. "No," returned Colin shortly, a light alarm whipping the dreams out of his face. He flicked his horse sharply over the ears as he answered, and tightened the reins, and the beast resumed its trot. Jessamine bit her lip in regretful vexation. All her life the beautiful Miss Halliday had blotted out the landscape for her, and it had been so sweet and new a thing to be forgotten, while this man revealed one corner of the undiscovered treasures of his mind. After this they drove on for some distance until they encountered a flock of sheep, which were being driven along the road to new pastures. They were going in an opposite direction, and had travelled for many miles and many days. The shepherds looked tired and exasperated, and the dogs were wearying of the distinction of their office. Colin, careful of adding to labour because he knew the meaning of labour, drew up against the side of the road. It took several minutes for the flock to pass, and then he drove on again for about a quarter of a mile. The railroad, a single country line, at this point ran parallel to and close upon the road. Colin suddenly brought his horse again to a standstill, and rose up from his seat. "What is it?" asked Jessamine. "That will be a sheep from the flock we have just met," returned McGilvray, pointing along the line with his whip. "The poor silly beastie has strayed away, and is running on the railroad." "Oh dear," said Jessamine, standing up too to look in her turn. "And there should be a train coming soon," added Colin, taking out his watch. "Oh dear me," cried Jessamine, "it will be killed. Can't we save it?" "We will be trying to, whatever," answered Colin, jumping from the dog-cart. When on the road, he hesitated for a second, and glanced up at Jessamine. The glance was doubtful, but the air with which he turned away was unmistakably disparaging. "I can hold the reins," said she, mistaking his idea. "Oh yes," replied the man, but the horse will stand well enough. Then he climbed the embankment and ran on until he overtook the sheep. The only result was that the animal slipped past him and raced along the path of peril in the opposite direction. This happened more than once, and at last he stood still, looking vexed and baffled. Jessamine, meanwhile, had felt the spur of that single disparaging glance. "Mr. McGilvray," she called from the dog-cart, "cannot I help you?" McGilvray, from his place on the embankment, once more surveyed the slim and cultivated grace of her figure as she stood up in the trap. His estimate set her obviously at naught, and he said nothing. But she jumped out of the dog-cart, climbed the embankment, and stood by his side, for his look smarted in her heart. "I might stand here," said she, making the proposition timidly, "while you try and drive it back once more." "That will do it," returned McGilvray cheerfully. "It is most kind of you. It is bound to jump down if there will be one of us on either side. You will be standing here, and will be waving your arms and shouting if it comes your way." Having made this proposition, and without waiting for a reply, he ran off again, leaving her with his command upon her conscience. She was considerably startled at the situation, but nevertheless stood where he had directed, her arms open and ready to wave like any automaton scarecrow, and her lips parted, ready to shout. Colin had got some 200 yards distant, and the game began. The sheep proved sillier than is even usual. It ran up and down between them, but clung to the line. At last it made a determined rush toward Jessamine, and she, being inwardly frightened, for though small it had horns, instead of dashing at it with such outcry as she could make, shrank back out of the way, drawing her skirts together and letting it get past to the line beyond. A shout from McGilvray carried a note of derision. Sooner than tolerate it, she recalled her courage, tore after the sheep at her utmost speed, got in front of it again, and drove it back toward him with desperate bravery. It began to be really exciting. It was the first time Jessamine had tasted real comradeship with a man. Comradeship is impossible where sex is predominant, and in the refined world which she had forsaken, sex stands opposite to sex, the stronger with the stirrings of an exhausted sensuality, the weaker comporting itself as a recherché morsel which knows its price. But here all was changed. This stalwart peasant saw her only as a serviceable human being. He shouted orders in a peremptory tone as he ran hither and thither, and she made every effort to obey them, sending back shrill retorts when necessary, her voice forsaking, in the exigency of the moment, that sweet lowness which is an excellent thing in drawing-rooms. All this rush and scramble was a matter of a few minutes. Suddenly an electric something flashed into Jessamine's face and changed it. In her look and movements great effort had hitherto been discernible, but now a vivid, uncontrollable spontaneity animated her. Her quick eye had seen the expected train approaching behind McGilvray, and at the same moment she saw that, occupied with running and shouting, he heard nothing. He was about 50 yards distant from her, and at the instant of her discovery, abandoning without a shadow of hesitation both the sheep and herself, she dashed forward at him along the line, her arms wildly outstretched, and a shriek of warning upon her lips. It was a swift, unpremeditated, and scarcely conscious action. She came back to a more normal state to find herself being snatched by McGilvray from the embankment, the sheep tumbling down headlong beside them, while the train flew past with horrid din. "Why, what ails the lass?" cried McGilvray. His rude grasp was still upon her. Her slight figure yielded, and her cheek and hair rested against the rough texture of his coat. When he saw her eyes close and a quiver distort her lips, he forgot the distinction of rank which hitherto he had been so careful to record in the least shade of his bearing, and thought only how tones of the voice and the homely pressure of firm muscle may reassure human terror. The sheep, meanwhile, began to tear up the road in the right direction, and the train disappeared. "Why, what will be ailing her?" he repeated with emotion. "She will be looking as frightened as the poor beastie itself. It will be too much running for her, after all. Oh, I am most sorry. I am most sorry." "Oh, no, no, no," cried Jessamine, opening her eyes and giving a great sigh. "I thought you didn't see the train. Oh, I thought you didn't see it. I thought oh, I don't know what I thought." And then scales, as it were, fell from her eyes. She knew that there was no scare, neither had there been danger or alarm. Suddenly she realized that her terror had been the creation of inexperience, and that McGilvray, treating her as one would treat a foolish, terrified child, was holding her in a close embrace. She snatched herself from his arms, the side which he had so rudely pressed, blushing unseen with angry shame, and stood defiantly apart, fury flecking her cheeks and dropping a veil upon her eyes. McGilvray, when she withdrew from him, let his arms fall, and stood contemplating her with an aspect of quiet wonder. Upon this, at last, a pucker of amusement stole. It began to dawn upon him that this slight whiff of humanity had supposed his own large and vigorous person to be in danger, and had flung herself forward to save him. It tickled all his heart and filled his whole nature with ecstatic laughter. Yet so gentle and tender an expression crossed the mighty amusement of his smile, that it went far to win him forgiveness. "Oh, no," he said. "Oh, no. I'm all right." His voice disparaged himself. "I'm all right, whatever." Then he turned to his horse and vaguely touched the harness about its nose, after which he took the reins suddenly into his hand. "We will be going home now," said he gravely. "The sheep is safe, and it is all well over." Jessamine, still furious and still shivering, found no method by which to assert her outraged dignity. The mere sense of mass in the nature of this man compelled her. She felt rather than saw the tranquil expectation of his eye, and her resources ran down to nothing. With a completely subdued air, she got in by his side, and they drove off in silence. End of chapter 8.